Today, I'm not just talking about a very neat little film, but we also delve deep into the history of Malayalam cinema. Servus Freunde, my name is Jimmy Cage and Celluloid is a 2013 Malayalam language biopic about the father of Malayalam cinema, J.C. Daniel, who made the very first Malayalam feature film in 1928, Prithviraj Sukumaran, The Lost Child. Unfortunately, it is one of thousands of old movies that are lost today. There is no known copy anymore, and it's a shame that we will never be able to watch those first images of Malayalam cinema. The very first images of Celluloid show us a child who is pulling out the film strip of its protective cover, jumping around on it and then setting fire to it. And I thought to myself, yeah, that's pretty much how I imagine India treating all of its older movies. Of course, it's not just India, this is a general problem when it comes to the preservation of film. But as we keep exploring Indian cinema on this channel, it became more and more frustrating to see how many old or even fairly new movies aren't made available anywhere in the quality they deserve. Now, I can only hope that for most of those movies, at least those original film prints still exist, and it's more a question about digitalization. But who knows? With that being said, the situation in this movie is a bit different, but it nevertheless points to the importance of preserving the cultural heritage. Celluloid was written and directed by Kamal, and it is based on two books. The biography about J.C. Daniel by the film journalist Gopalakrishnan, who is also known as the father of Malayalam cinema history, and the novel Nashtanayika by Vino Abraham, which depicts the saga of the tragic life of P.K. Rosie, the first heroine in Malayalam cinema, and the making of Prithviraj Sukumaran. Celluloid stars Prithviraj Sukumaran as J.C. Daniel, and the movie opens up with him trying to learn everything he needs to know to make a movie of his own. The year is 1928, and Daniel is meeting Dadasaheb Phalke, the father of Indian cinema. And of course, I immediately thought about the Marathi language movie Harishchandra's Factory, which was produced 4 years prior to Celluloid, and which depicts Phalke's struggle and in the end success to make the first Indian movie. And the best thing is, Nandu Madhav, who portrayed Phalke, is reprising his role for Celluloid. So this kind of feels like a nice continuation of exploring the early days of Indian cinema. And as we have said in our review of Harishchandra's Factory, as students of film, we are always super interested in watching movies like this and learning more about this facet of history. And the first half of Celluloid feels quite similar. It doesn't feature as much humor as Harishchandra's Factory, but it also has this mostly light-hearted, adventurous pioneer vibe. It's quite sweet, with J.C. Daniel and the rest of the crew being super enthusiastic and curious to make a movie. Prithviraj is very charismatic in the role, and his fascination with this new medium and his decision to risk everything to make a movie is very contagious. It's also important to know that Daniel didn't want to make a mythological movie. He was a big fan of Charlie Chaplin and he wanted to create something that hasn't been done in India. He wanted to make a social drama. Celluloid shows how Daniel established the first film studio in Kerala, named the Travancore National Pictures. And while the movie is very much a tribute to Daniel and his achievements, it is also a memorial for the first heroine in Malayalam cinema, P.K. Rosie. In his first movies, Phalke had to use men for the roles of women, because at that time it was nearly impossible to find women because of the stigma attached to acting in movies. In Daniel's time, it was a little bit easier, but still super difficult to find someone in the region that he lived in. But he found his heroine in the young woman P.K. Rosie, who at the time was still known as Rosamma. For Daniel, it was no problem that Rosamma was from the Dalit caste, the lowest one in India's caste system, the so-called untouchables. Daniel saw an opportunity in cinema to overcome those social structures. Someone from a lower caste could play someone from an upper caste, and the other way around. Rosamma is played by Chandini, and as far as I know, it is her only credit as an actress. For this role, she fits very well, because Rosamma is this super shy young woman who can't really believe that she's allowed to interact in this way with people from higher castes. With her introduction, we get some very immersive location shots, depicting the beautiful landscape of Kerala, something that I have grown to love about Malayalam cinema. It is a nice change of pace, because there's something more natural and realistic to those scenes, while the majority of Celluloid plays a bit more theatrical and artificial than what I'm used to from more recent Malayalam films. We also get this really beautiful song Inundodi that wonderfully captures the good-hearted nature and the excitement of Rosamma. The music of Celluloid has been composed by M. Jayachandran Chandran, and the lyrics for En und Dodi were penned by Engandio Chandrasekharan. There's another nice song later on, Kate Kate, with lyrics by Rafiq Ahmed. Now, the way the movie portrays Rosama's integration into the film crew is sweet, but also a bit too sweetish for my own taste. The direction in general, as well as the performances, are a bit uneven. Sometimes it has a very authentic feel, but more often it is rather heightened in a overly happy-go-lucky kind of way, and sometimes it feels a bit stilted as well. Most of the movie's themes are painted with very broad strokes. It is very commendable how the movie shines a light not just on the early days of Malayalam cinema, but also on what almost destroyed its legacy and rightful remembrance: the antiquated, inhuman caste system, to this date one of India's biggest problems. The second half of Celluloid is quite different from the first, jumping many years ahead in time, depicting Daniel's struggle in life after his first film and the struggle to show the public that it was indeed him who created the very first Malayalam movie. We are getting introduced to the film journalist Chelangat Gopalakrishnan, played by the one and only Sreenivasan. Now, being a scholar of film myself, I can't deny that it is very nice to see a movie that emphasizes the importance of a person like Gopalakrishnan and of remembering and acknowledging the past and true history. Remembering the artists and also learning from the mistakes of the past. The caste system has destroyed many lives, and in this case it also almost destroyed the real origin of Malayalam cinema, and it prevented an artist like Daniel and a heroine like PK Rosie from maybe creating more classics and pushing Indian cinema into other fascinating directions. On the other hand, this different perspective in the second half also amplified the uneven nature of the film as a whole for me. From a very close point of storytelling, we change to this outsider perspective, and the movie is trying to retell a lot of things that have happened in the later years of Daniel, but with the limited screen time, we can only get a small glimpse. And while his life took a very tragic turn and it can be felt to some degree, the whole conflict within his family wasn't all that tangible for me. There are also quite a few hiccups in the movie when it comes to technical aspects and filmmaking decisions. After a rather long sequence in which Daniel is meeting the snobbish, arrogant first actress he chose for his movie, we don't see how he is kicking them out, which would have been quite satisfactory, but instead the movie rather awkwardly wipes away to the next scene. And while the aging makeup is decent, the film also totally unnecessarily features one of the worst rear projection scenes I have ever seen in a modern movie. It would have been way better to took it out or rather reshoot the scene in a different way. It's especially jarring because, like I said, there are a lot of beautiful location shots in the film. There are two other nitpicks I have to mention. One is a small scene at Daniel's dentist clinic that feels so exaggerated. I guess it should be a little bit of comic relief maybe, but it felt very out of place to me. The other moment where the tone feels completely off is the moment in which a very sad letter from Daniel's wife is read, and it is done in front of this beautiful seaside backdrop with the sound of the sea. Shortly after, we also hear a small snippet from a classical song for the movie Achanum Bapayum. Again, I can only assume that this is something that speaks to a Malayalam audience in a nostalgic way, but for me there seemed to be no real connection to this story and it felt just rather jarring. And maybe that's my main concern with the whole movie. I think it's great that it shines a light on the history of Malayalam cinema, and all the basic ingredients definitely work. Prithviraj is wonderful, and through the progression in the second half he is able to show more facets than just being this charismatic filmmaker. It's also nice to see Sreenivasan, see his determination and his interactions with Daniel. The story itself is of course great and it's important to tell it, but as a whole the movie is just a bit too uneven for my own taste. So in German I'd say: Celluloid macht eine unglaublich wichtige Geschichte für das heutige Publikum wieder greifbar. Der Film zeigt nicht nur die Wichtigkeit auf, die eigene kulturelle Vergangenheit am Leben zu erhalten, sondern auch aus den Fehlern und Missständen der Gesellschaft zu lernen. Filmtechnisch ist er aber leider auch etwas uneben. Normally this would be a 6 out of 10 for me, but because the subject matter is so dear to my heart, I will push it to a 7 out of 10. It's more like 6.5, but I don't do that. Alright, that's it like always. Comment below and let me know what you think about Celluloid. You can hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd and also on Patreon, simply at @JimmyCage. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up, share, subscribe, whatever you like. And make sure you hit that bell for all I have to tell.